In the spring of 1241, a European army of professional knights, heavily armored, deeply Christian, and utterly confident, was annihilated in under an hour by a force that may have been outnumbered 3-1. The commander of that European army did not just lose the battle, he lost his head, quite literally, and it was paraded on a spear in front of his own city's walls. For nearly 800 years, historians have argued about almost every detail of this battle, how many men actually fought, who truly commanded the winning side, and whether the numbers we've been told are even remotely accurate. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how one afternoon near a small Polish town became one of the most mythologized battles in medieval history, and why the truth is stranger and far more interesting than the legend. To understand what happened at Legnica, we have to go back 4 years, to 1237, when the Mongol Empire turned its full attention toward Europe. Under the grandsons of Genghis Khan, Mongol armies had already conquered most of Russia, and the princes of Kiev, Ryazan, and Vladimir had learned at devastating cost what happened to cities that refused to surrender. The overall Mongol strategy in 1241 split into two massive prongs, one aimed at Hungary under the brilliant General Subutai, and a second, smaller force sent north into Poland with a very specific job: distraction. That Polish force was commanded by two Mongol princes, Baidar and Kadan, and their mission was simple: keep the fractured Polish duchies too busy and too frightened to send help to Hungary. In February of 1241, that Mongol force crossed the frozen rivers of Poland, and the speed of what followed stunned everyone who witnessed it. On the 18th of March, they crushed a Polish army at Chmielnik. 6 days later, on Palm Sunday, they burned Krakow, the Polish capital, to the ground. Then they turned toward Wrocław, the capital of Silesia, but found its defenses too strong to bother with, so instead, they went looking for the man gathering an army to stop them: Duke Henry II of Silesia, known to history as Henry the Pious. Here's the strange part. Nobody in Western Europe had any real idea who these invaders were. Chroniclers called them Tartars, a play on the word Tartarus, the Greek word for hell, because it seemed like the only explanation for where they'd come from. Henry the Pious was not a warlord. He was a reformer, a patron of monasteries, a man trying to unify the fractured Polish duchies under one crown. And by 1241, he ruled Krakow, Silesia, and Greater Poland. When word came that the Mongols were burning their way across southern Poland, Henry did what any responsible duke would do. He called in every favor he had. He gathered Polish knights from his own duchy, German settlers and miners from Silesian towns, a small contingent of Knights Templar sent from France, and members of the Teutonic Knights. Historians still argue fiercely over how large this army actually was. Older popular accounts claimed as many as 30,000 men. But modern historians, working from records of the actual Silesian nobility at the time, argue that number is likely inflated by a wide margin, and that Henry's real force was probably closer to a few thousand fighting men, heavily outnumbered by the picture medieval chroniclers later painted. What we do know for certain is that Henry was waiting for reinforcements. His brother-in-law, King Wenceslaus I of Bohemia, was marching toward him with a much larger relief army, possibly numbering in the tens of thousands. That relief force was only about 2 days away. Henry had a choice: wait behind the walls of Legnica for Wenceslaus to arrive, or march out and meet the Mongols himself. On the 9th of April, 1241, he chose to march out. According to legend, as Henry rode through the city gates, a stone fell from the roof of St. Mary's Church and nearly struck him. The people of Legnica took it as an omen. They were right too. The two armies met on a plain about 10 kilometers southeast of Legnica, near a village that would later be renamed Legnicki Pol, or in German, Wahlstatt, meaning the chosen place, or the place of battle. The Mongol force facing Henry was likely far smaller than the popular myth suggests. Some estimates place the Mongol contingent at only around 8,000 riders, possibly less, meaning that even Henry's smaller modern estimated army might have roughly matched them in size or come close to it. What the Mongols lacked in raw numbers, they made up for in discipline, coordination, and battlefield communication that no European army of the period could match. European armies of this era fought largely by reputation and personal glory, knights charging where honor demanded. Mongol armies fought by signal flags, drums, and whistling arrows, coordinating movements across the battlefield with a level of command and control that Europe would not widely adopt for centuries. The battle began with the Mongols sending forward a smaller detachment, and it did exactly what it was designed to do. It retreated. The feigned retreat was one of the oldest tricks in steppe warfare, and it worked because it exploited exactly what European knights were trained to do: chase down a fleeing enemy and finish them off. Henry's heavy cavalry, some of his best and most experienced knights, charged forward and broke away from the rest of the army. It was exactly what the Mongols wanted. With the knights separated from Henry's infantry, a screen of smoke, likely from burning reeds or straw, drifted across the battlefield. Some medieval chroniclers claimed it was a form of early chemical warfare. Most historians today believe it was simpler than that. A deliberate smokescreen meant to confuse and disorient, battlefield theater as much as battlefield tactic. Whatever it was, it worked. Henry's knights, now isolated and blinded by smoke, were surrounded by Mongol horse archers firing from multiple directions at once, a tactic historians call the Mongol bow formation, where cavalry encircle an enemy and fire without ever closing into direct melee range. Heavy European armor, so effective against a direct cavalry charge, offered little protection against a constant rain of arrows from every angle. The infantry behind them, poorly equipped local levies, stood almost no chance at all. Let's pause here for a moment and recap what's happened so far. A Mongol diversionary force, likely numbering under 10,000, had crossed Poland in weeks, defeating every army sent against it. Duke Henry the Pious gathered a coalition army, likely a few thousand strong, and marched out to meet them rather than wait for Bohemian reinforcements just 2 days away. The Mongols used a feigned retreat to draw off Henry's best cavalry, then used smoke and encirclement to isolate and destroy his army piece by piece. Now, here's where it gets personal, because Duke Henry himself was still on that field. As his army collapsed around him, Henry tried to escape with a small group of his personal guard. According to the primary chronicle sources, he didn't make it far. He was surrounded, pulled from his horse, and killed. His body was later found on the field, and according to multiple accounts, his head was removed and displayed on a spear in front of the walls of Legnica. A grim message to the city that had just watched its duke ride out to war. Local legend claims the Mongols also collected the ears of the fallen to count the dead, reportedly filling 9 sacks, though this detail comes from later chronicle tradition and should be treated as part of the battle's legend rather than a confirmed fact. Henry's wife, Anna, is said to have identified her husband's headless body afterward by a unique physical detail: 6 toes on 1 foot. Whether that detail is fact or folklore, it captures something true about this battle. Almost everything we know about it comes filtered through legend, grief, and centuries of retelling. Here's a question worth sitting with. Why does a battle this small, in terms of raw numbers, loom so large in European memory? Here's the twist that most retellings leave out. The Mongols didn't stay. Despite winning one of the most lopsided victories in medieval history, Baidar and Khadan turned their army south, away from the heart of Europe, to link up with the main Mongol force under Batu and Subutai in Hungary. Their mission was never to conquer Poland. It was only ever to make sure Poland couldn't send help to Hungary, and they'd already succeeded. 2 days later, the main Mongol army crushed the Hungarian royal army at the much larger Battle of Mohi, a battle where the real strategic stakes of the 1241 invasion were actually decided. Then, in December of that same year, the great Khan Ugadai died back in Mongolia, thousands of miles away. And under Mongol succession law, every prince with royal blood was required to return home for the selection of a new ruler. That single, distant death in the Mongol capital likely saved the rest of Western Europe from an invasion it had no realistic way of stopping. Legnica wasn't the battle that stopped the Mongols. A funeral in Karakorum did. So why do we call this the battle that built the Mongol myth? Because in the decades that followed, European chroniclers, who had almost no reliable information about who the Mongols actually were, filled that gap with fear. Stories spread of an unstoppable horde from the edge of the world, inhuman, unbeatable, sent as divine punishment. The real Mongol army that fought at Legnica was small, disciplined, and following a specific strategic objective, not an endless supernatural horde, but a well-organized, professional force executing a distraction with brutal efficiency. And that's really the story underneath the legend. Not that Europe faced an unstoppable evil, but that it faced a smaller, better organized, better coordinated army and lost anyway because discipline beat numbers, and numbers were never really the point. Today, the battlefield at Legnica Pole is a quiet green field with a small museum and a stone monument, and the loudest thing standing there is the wind. If you want to go deeper on this topic, I've linked a book in the description. It's one of the most thorough accounts of the entire Mongol invasion of Europe that I've found, covering Legnica, Mohi, and everything in between. Link is below. All the sources used in this video, the academic references, the archaeological reports, and the original chronicle translations, are linked in the description below, along with more information about this channel. If you found this story as strange and compelling as I did, consider subscribing, because next time, we're going even further back, to a battle that some historians argue never should have been winnable at all.